All right, we'll just give it a minute here. Let everyone join in. Thank you for being here. All right, I'll go ahead and get started. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are joining us from, and welcome back. Hopefully, welcome back to another one of our NeoGov webinars. Thank you for joining us today for this webinar titled Raising the Standard, Making Responder Wellness Part of Your Daily Operations. We're excited to have you with us, and for what I know will be an incredibly important and practical discussion. Before we get started today, just a couple quick housekeeping items. Today's session is being recorded. It will be shared with you and everyone who registered after this webinar today. So in just a couple hours, you should receive an email with a link on how to access that recording that you can share with your colleagues as well. During the presentation today, we encourage you to submit questions throughout the presentation using the Q&A chat feature. So in the upper right-hand corner of your GoToWebinar, there should be the speech bubble with a question mark in it. That is for Q&A. Feel free to put any of your questions in there. We'll answer as many as we can live at the end of the presentation before we run out of time for today. And any that we don't get to, we'll be able to follow up with you afterwards. So today's conversation focuses on a challenge many agencies are actively trying to solve. How do we move beyond simply offering wellness resources and begin creating support systems that responders actually trust, use, and experience as part of daily operations? Most agencies already have programs in place, whether that's EAPs, peer support, wellness apps, or training initiatives. But as many leaders have experienced firsthand, availability doesn't always equal adoption. Today's speakers will explore what it takes to shift from reactive wellness efforts to proactive operational support that's built into the culture, workflows, and everyday realities of responder organizations. We'll discuss why wellness resources often go underused, what builds trust and consistent engagement, the role leadership and supervisors play in reducing stigma, and practical ways to integrate wellness into day-to-day operations without adding unnecessary complexity. We here at NeoGov are very fortunate and very happy to be joined today by three outstanding speakers with deep operational and real-world experience. Together, they'll share practical, actionable insights on how agencies can create support systems that are proactive, trusted, and operationally effective. I'm going to let them take a moment to introduce themselves and their qualifications and backgrounds. So with that, I'm pleased to hand it over to Jeff Hamer to get us started.
Thanks so much. My name is Jeff Hamer. I'm a retired police chief here in West Central Illinois. I've did 25 years on the job, last 3 as chief. For the past 10 years, I've also been director of accreditation for the Illinois Association of Chiefs of Police. And through my policing background, been through some traumatic events, a couple officer-involved shootings. So I think poised to add to the wellness conversation. I'll turn it over to Michael.
Yeah, thank you, Jeff. My name's Michael Stahl. I'm managing partner with the Mental Hygiene Project. I come from a background of corporate leadership development training and have had the opportunity to work with organizations both in the public sector and the private sector worldwide. And also in doing that, I've had the chance to work with a lot of behavioral traits assessments to really determine how stress affects performance and how we can deal with stress constructively as opposed to destructively. I'm a master trainer in something called the Harrison Assessment, and I'm really looking forward to today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. My name is Ryan Gallik. I'm a managing partner of the Mental Hygiene Project, an Orlando-based company. That said, I spent nearly 20 years as a firefighter paramedic before an early retirement. During my tenure at the city of St. Cloud in Central Florida, I helped develop the peer support team, and I also am the co-founder of the Florida Firefighter Safety and Health Collaborative. During my tenure, I went to the National Fire Academy and took safety program operations, which certainly had a wellness component with that. And all of that said, really looking forward to bringing you some insights and even some new terminology that you may have not heard. So I really look forward to engaging, take some notes, and let's get this going.
Excellent. Hey, thanks, Ryan. So many of us here, work or have worked for an agency, municipality, a county government, public safety in general. And so what we want to do is kind of get to like common ground of, what most agencies have today, right? There's plenty of resources out there. A lot of agencies have an EAP, an employee assistance program. We have peer support. We also have other wellness resources. But the real question is, are these the right supports at the right time in a culture that supports their use? So we're going to dig in today and kind of answer those questions. What's the right support at the right time with the right culture?
Yeah, and
We
it's
know that,
interesting.
oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead, Jeff.
I was going to say, availability doesn't equal adoption, right? We know these entities can have these resources. Could it be checking a box? Could it be, um, a list? And in fact, I know at one point in my department, we had a list of EAPs, but no number on the form. So it was sort of like, yeah, we had checked the box, we hadn't checked it correctly. And so I think that sort of attests to, yeah, it was available. We didn't quite adopt it, make it usable. But I wanted to throw it to Michael and Ryan to kind of talk about this EAP landscape that we have.
Yeah, sure. James, if you want to go ahead and click to the next slide there. It's interesting, and thank you, Jeff. Appreciate that. When you talk about mental resilience programs, availability, unfortunately, doesn't really equal adoption. And what Jeff's talking about in terms of employee assistance programs, the statistics say that 98% of small to, or pardon me, medium size to large organizations have an EAP. And yet the utilization rate is less than 4%. So certainly all of us are huge advocates of the employee assistance programs. Nothing that we do is wanting to replace the EAPs. We really want to be a complement to the employee assistance programs. And we'll talk a little bit to you today about how we can really do that. So we're improving the utilization rate of the EAPs and then also complementing that with other strategies and methodologies.
Yeah, when we look at peer support, we really have to look and see if there's creating a high trust environment. Trust doesn't mean that there's an absence of distrust. Trust is earned in drops and it's lost in buckets. We know that. And really and truly, we as leaders need to look at our peer support team as trauma informed leaders. And part of trauma informed leadership is following key practices and principles such as safety, emotional intelligence, and trust. And so, with that, there's a responsibility of the individual to establish and maintain trust amongst those that they interact with, ethical decision making, integrity, things like that. However, as an organizational leader or decision maker, we need to ensure that there's policies that help cultivate that trust. And what I mean by that is ensuring that there's a proper application process and interview for getting on the peer support team. These are just hand selected people. These are individuals who have went through a process, and the memberships, the non-members of peer support, knows what it took for those individuals to be there. There's a level of accountability. And so also having clear and fair policies, such as, hey, you have to attend X percentage of peer support training to be able to remain an active member. Because I remember one time being on the peer support team, had someone come to me and I told them, hey, Adam would be a great resource for that. Like, yeah, he never shows up to the training. That's what I heard. So we really need to ensure that there's individual accountability, but organizational accountability to really drive that trust.
Ryan, you brought up peer support, and I can remember the exact moment in time that I knew my department needed a peer support component. And an officer had shared with me that they went to, they had contacted the AP after we got the number on the form, contacted the AP, went to a local mental health facility, not a facility, a center, to talk with a counselor, just about trouble they were kind of having in life. They needed a life coach sit down. But in the waiting room, there was probably 2 or 3 people that they had had contact with from the community in like an arrest situation. And they got warm, they got flushed, they just feel like it wasn't the right fit for them, so they left. Um, and it was at that moment I was like, we kind of need maybe some anonymous peer support, other types of peer support, and that. But that was it's great that you bring that up, because that's going to be central to our discussion today. Having something that fits that officer. So here we are to complement the EAP, complement peer support, and move forward from there.
Yeah, I think, and thank you both for saying that. And Jeff, to your point, it has to be culturally competent. Any kind of peer support or clinician intervention has to be culturally competent. So the peer support specialist or any clinician really understands uh, what people go through on the job. And then apps, there are lots of apps out there. Certainly, Power DMS has an outstanding app. And yet, just having the tool, unfortunately, doesn't mean that it's being utilized. And then sometimes that impact can be difficult to measure as well. So we have to look at organizational resilience. And if we're utilizing tools, how can we figure out a way to measure the impact in order to have consistency moving forward?
And
Excellent
then
point,
this,
Michael.
I'm sorry, go ahead, Jeff.
I was just going to say, excellent point. Yep.
And then as we move into wellness training, a lot, we certainly, I think there would be no one on the call here on this webinar that would dismiss the fact that a lot of agencies are integrating wellness training and really trying to find those best practices, better practices to really drive culture. But that said, historically, have we seen that there's been a culture of avoidance within these programs? And we have to be open and reflective as leaders to really be certain in what we know and we believe, but also being open and reflective to other people's opinions and understanding that there may be a disconnect. So, really, if we have these wellness trainings, departments or divisions rather, is there a level of psychological safety that's been established? And we have to really understand that, again, part of being trauma informed leaders is understanding safety. So again, are they being avoided due to a lack of psychological safety and being able to speak up and say, hey, listen, I really don't know how to do this, or hey, I'm not doing well, whatever it may be. That can certainly be a barrier to getting more engagement within those wellness trainings.
Excellent, Ryan. And so you talk about barriers. James, if we could advance one, um, where we look at why support breaks down. Um, is the support showing up too late? Does it feel separate or disconnected from the job? These are getting into this cultural, where it's culturally acceptable to incorporate wellness into the department and into your professional life. But we're going to talk about how wellness is going to, we're going to bridge the gap between wellness and how it's actually readiness. Um, and sometimes the support breaks down because it requires the responders to initiate. And I feel like if we want our officers, our firefighters, our dispatchers to get to if we're asking them to go to a 20, 25, 30-year arc of a career, I think we need to incorporate early intervention and maybe a holistic approach that's not just one box checked with one resource, because we're people. We're not one size fits all. We're an infinite combination of what makes us a unique person. So, Michael, how or why these supports break down, and can you talk about that?
Yeah, absolutely, Jeff. To your point about sometimes showing up too late in terms of the support, um, what we don't want to do is just have a checkbox, because, as I mentioned before, things have to be consistent. And sometimes there's obviously all different sizes of departments, of course. And sometimes with smaller departments, uh, people would say, well, we just don't we don't have the time, or we don't have the budget, or it's just not for us. And then things don't get done. Here's the good news: no matter what size your department is, there are strategies and methodologies and things that you can use to improve mental resilience and to be proactive instead of reactive. The idea is that we want to be as proactive as possible instead of just looking at something that's reactive. EAP is fantastic, as we talked about. We're big advocates of it. A lot of times it's reactive. And so we want to make sure that we're proactive and not show up before it's too late, or just quote when it's needed.
I think when we look at feel separate from the job, we really have to understand, a couple of terms that we've used as trauma-informed leadership, but let's also look at healthy leadership. And healthy leadership is a leadership style, a transformational leadership style that focuses on employee health and well-being. And today, if we want to create a competitive advantage, we have to be a healthy leader. We have to cultivate that. We have to model the behaviors that we want to see from our first responders. And so that said, when it feels separate from the job, there still may be some lingering people not completely bought in. And when I say people, I'm speaking of leaders, those that hold the position and the title of leader that may not be bought into this. And it cannot feel separate from the job because there's something called the psychological contract. There's another term. We've talked about trauma informed leadership, healthy leadership, and now psychological contract. The psychological contract is an unwritten yet a belief system of expectations and beliefs from an employer to the employee, but also from the employee to the employer. And those getting on the job today do believe that there's a psychological contract that the organization has an ethical and moral responsibility to ensure that you focus on my health and well-being because of the things that I see and do. And one thing we can all agree on is that the person we are today is not quite the same person we are tomorrow, a year from now, 5 years from now, because this job changes us. So again, we can't create a situation where support breaks down because we don't have leadership bought in.
And what about those situations where you say, look, guys, we already have a strong culture, and we're bought in to mental resilience, and we require people to raise their hand if they need help. We encourage them to raise their hand and seek that help. Well, here's the challenge with that, and it goes back to something that Ryan had mentioned earlier about psychological safety. Safety is subjective. What feels and seems safe to me may not feel and seem safe to you. And so the idea is that as leaders and command staff, we have to really understand organizationally how we communicate that across the board. Otherwise, even if you already think that you do have a positive culture when it comes to mental resilience, support can still break down.
Excellent. Great points. James, let's advance one. So like, Michael, if I'm hearing you right, this isn't just like a wellness challenge, like, oh, we're going to get a program, which might be very in vogue. But to actually institute an operational challenge, this isn't just window dressing. This isn't new wallpaper we're putting on the walls of the building. An operational challenge. And let's take some time to talk about what the right culture looks like, the right support, and the right timing. And Ryan, I'll let you take off first here.
Yeah, we really have to look and ensure that we've got the right culture. And it, I want to reiterate something that Chief just said. It, it's not about what we have on the wall, the poster. We have a 3 or 5 year strategic plan. Here's the organizational mission statement. Here's the vision statement. We have to understand that culture is built in the small moments. Our global director of research and learning, Dr. Shannon Taylor, is a professor of management at UCF, and was having a conversation with him the other day, and he believes that culture is built from leaders having the engagement and the connectedness with individuals. So we really have to ask ourselves: are our leaders you know, driving culture, or are they defaulting to a culture? Because here's what we know: leaders drive culture. They either define it or they default to it. There's only two options. We have to define it every single day.
And the thing is, it really goes beyond just saying, well, you know what? Everybody's burned out, stressed out, and maxed out. That's just a part of the job. We see traumatic things that other people don't see, all of which is true. And that's an important acknowledgement, to be sure. And yet, a deeper acknowledgement is the fact that there are people on the job right now, first responders, who have real lived experience that goes beyond what peer support can handle. And they need professional clinical intervention. And leadership has to not only acknowledge that and not only be aware of that, we have to really be open to creating organizational programs like stay at work programs, return to work programs, so we can keep people integrated on the job and then reintegrate back into the job seamlessly and in a way that allows people to come back to the job recovered and healthier than before.
So timing, I think, becomes critical. I agree with what you said, especially about culture is every day, right? So that the regular intervals is going to normalize check-ins. I policed at a small department, and we often fell back on this, like, well, we're a small department, we all know what's going on in each other's lives, we're like family, it's easy. I found it's a lot harder to talk to family about difficult things than it is, not that we work with strangers, but that normalize these check-ins, whether you're a small department and you're all family, or you're a medium or large size department. The sergeants, the informal leaders, the bat chiefs, the paramedic supervisors, we all need to normalize these check-ins, not only at or right after a critical incident, but let's also do it during, just like in a regular event. Maybe it doesn't reach critical mass, but just, I had this saying and it was so clunky, but it was like, when there's something abnormal, you have to increase communication. This is a perfect example of that. Just increase that check-in, and the timing will be correct. And next slide, James. James, can we advance one more? There we go. So let's look at, are we offering support or just saying we do? I'm going to turn it over to the experts, Ryan and Michael here, to kind of talk about the points that you see on the screen here.
Yeah, you just said something really powerful, Chief. Are we offering support, or are we just saying we do? I'm going to throw another term out to you: well-being washing. Well-being washing, essentially saying that there's a belief that the organization, organizational leaders having a belief that they're really providing support, but deep down, each person within the organization, that the organizational members don't believe that there's a true commitment. And so one way that we can, avoid this is really focusing and practicing on behavioral integrity. There's a correlation between what we say and what we do. And that's how you avoid well-being washing. And so that said, looking at and ensuring things are evidence-based, this whole mental health and general wellness approach, there seems to be a lot of people coming through the woodwork providing educational training programs. And some of them are great, but we have, as leaders, an ethical and moral responsibility to ask these individuals that are coming into your department, what are their qualifications? Who's doing the training? Is it evidence based? Who did the research? Do you have a technical paper or any type of documentation showing the exact results? And really asking those courageous questions rather than, oh, yeah, hey, somebody knows somebody, they're going to come in and do a training program. We need to ensure that there's evidence based practice being integrated in our wellness training programs.
And the more something is evidence based, the more practical and relevant it becomes, and the more usable it becomes in the moment. And anything when it comes to training and development or systems and processes and strategies that we would use or that we would really introduce to our departments, they have to be usable in the moment. It could be something as simple as breathing exercises, ways to stay regulated during traumatic situations. It could be mobile technology that monitors first responders in real time when they're actually on the job. But all of these things, to Ryan's point, really need to be evidence based because that's the foundation that creates the opportunity for these things to be relevant and practical in the real world.
They need to be easy to access, and the best way is right here, a telephone. This is something that we have on our person all the time. I mean, some people, oddly sleep within just, a few inches or a foot away from their cell phone at night. They always have this on their person. So things that are easy to access, really avoiding barriers to getting the help.
And that leads to being culturally supported. We don't want to be well-being washers. We want to really be committed as leadership and command staff to healthy leadership. And that cascades throughout the organization, through the department. If there are people that are advocates for mental resilience and well-being within the department, and the leadership doesn't define a culture, as Ryan was talking about before, that focuses on healthy leadership and trauma informed leadership, it's going to be very difficult for the entire department to really build and grow and transform. So it has to be culturally supported.
Next slide, please. Michael, I love what you said about transformation because that's a perfect segue into this topic here. I'm going to kind of like address the audience here, kind of break the fourth wall a little bit, but like think of your own house, your own public safety shop, right? It could be comms, paramedic, fire, dispatch, police, what have you, corrections. You know, how are things today? Is it crisis driven? Is it inconsistent? Is it some of the things that we've talked about? So kind of put pins in those things, and we're going to start this transformation, this shift. And what's the desired state, Michael and Ryan? What's the desire? What does the forward thinking department look like?
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. That's really important to set the foundation because, as we had mentioned before, we don't want it to just be reactive or crisis driven. Hey, this situation happened. This was a traumatic call. So this is what we're going to do based on that. It's not just about being reactive, it's about being proactive. It has to be built into the day for each one of the first responders. Really, when you talk about mental resilience and well being as a part of the culture, it becomes proactive. And then when it does become proactive, it's easier for people not just to understand it, but to make it part of every single day that people go into work and that they're on shift and that they're on the job.
When we look at separate from workflow, we really have to understand this whole integration of operational wellness in the day to day. And it's part of being a manager, a supervisor, a leader, more specifically, a healthy leader. And I really want to invite you right now to do a self-assessment and ask yourself, as a leader, am I willing to look at one of my employees, one of my firefighters, one of my officers, one of my dispatchers, and share a story where I have to foster vulnerability and share one of my struggles? Think about that for a moment. Are you willing to do that? And just in a couple of previous slides, we talked about evidence-based. And the evidence now of healthy leadership is saying that leaders should be vulnerable. Now, on the flip side of that, there's a goal of not oversharing, but we really have to be vulnerable and be able to express and engage and share our own struggles. It's clear in the evidence, and it's hard to do. But that's where that shift occurs. We can't continue doing the same things over and over again and expecting different results. Same as Lane. We have to create that shift, be courageous, be the healthy leader, and lead from the top down.
And part of creating that shift is really normalizing the conversation around mental health, around well-being. It, for so many years in the first responder world, has been stigmatized. And people, it felt that they couldn't talk about it. You shouldn't talk about it. If you do talk about it, you're weak, which obviously couldn't be farther from the truth. And so in a reactive organization, the focus is inconsistent. Things are just used occasionally. We want to make sure that there's consistent reinforcement and that things are practiced regularly. And it's interesting because studies tell us that people can handle uncertainty better than they can handle inconsistency. So if there is perceived inconsistency from the command staff, that's going to have a negative ripple effect throughout the entire department, whether it's your officers, your firefighters, your dispatchers. It's going to have a negative effect. So we want to be consistent with the message. And when we're consistent with the message, that allows people to understand that we are committed as well.
One point that seems to be coming into focus, and let me walk us down a little path real quick. When we're talking about, wellness and how we want to transform that into readiness, kind of an example I want to draw is like physical fitness, right? Like if we're going to be physically fit, that's not a thing we can do at 4 o'clock and become physically fit. Like we need to go to the gym, build it in every day. We walk, we park further back and get a few extra steps in. We do all this stuff to make ourselves strong for our jobs and for our, healthy bodies physically. We reinforce that consistently. Maybe we work out with a group, and like that level, like physical readiness doesn't really have that stigma in first responder land, does it? And so like, this is where I think we need to harness that sort of an attitude. No one's dogging anybody for going to the gym and doing 100 squats or whatever. They're like, oh no, it's celebrated. But if somebody says like, yeah, Sarge, I had trouble after that call. I'm just confused. I'm just, there's like a stigma with that you can't hang or we need to erode that and wash it away and say the culture needs to be that the Sarge is checking in, the things that are irregular or things that are critical. It needs to be consistent. Check in when nothing's going on. So it's kind of like building that like mental health gym. That's where we're getting to readiness. Would you guys agree?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's the little things they're the building blocks for the bigger things, the bigger cultural shift. And when that really is something that leaders in the command staff advocates and supports, that it creates all the positive foundation that we need.
Excellent. James, advance us one more. So here, operational wellness, what it's looking like. We opened that conversation. Michael, take it away.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. Thank you, Jeff. So, looking at operational wellness and support, what does that actually look like? Well, there's three fundamental things that we have to look at: communication, collaboration, and consistency. And an example of that, another thing that some of you may already do, in which case, if you do, it's great. Some of you may not be familiar with. And it's called a one-to-one stay interview. And we've all heard of exit interviews. When somebody is leaving the organization, we interview them, we find out, why they're leaving, what potentially could be improved. But yet we want to retain our very best talent. And so how do we do that? Well, one-to-one stay interviews are engaging in interviews while people are still on the job, asking questions like, what do you like about the department? What do you think is good? What are our strengths? And then also asking questions like, what do you think could be improved? What do you think we could do better? How could we do it better? What are your ideas on how we could improve? And this accomplishes several things. Number one, it allows people to be heard. Everybody wants to feel like they're a part of something larger than themselves. So people understand that they have a seat at the table. And when people are listened to, the statistics say that the one-to-one stay interviews increase retention of the best talent by more than 20%. So this is something that is incredibly practical and relevant for you to utilize within your own departments.
I want to add something. Mike talked about the one-to-one stay interview. So there's another nugget. We're again giving you a lot of these terms and defining them so you can integrate them into your culture. Now, certainly there needs to be a level of psychological safety and to establish trust. And this is where we create those moments for bigger opportunities to, once we have that established, ask more courageous conversations. Hey Tim, I've noticed that you've been, showing up to, work late, or hey, I've noticed that you've not been, acting yourself. How can I help you? This is the supervisor. So now we're asking more courageous conversations, and because of all of those previous conversations where there were easier questions, we've established that safety. We have established emotional intelligence. We've established trust. And now we might just be able to create that human connection that really meets people where they are and can help them. So, again, that one-to-one stay interview may seem like it's really soft, but over time, it can be incredibly impactful.
That's really huge. What two things you guys touched on: this one-on-one interview and what Ryan said about having these conversations. So those together, like Michael points out, statistically, it's going to improve retention. And I'm sure so many of our audience has heard about recruitment retention. Recruitment retention, it's a nationwide issue in public safety. I know for me, this is a nugget I just took away just now. I've always thought of retention as like, okay, how do we keep the people? This conversation, how do we make them want to stay? How do we invest in them so that they're not looking at the grass is greener in some other department? And so I think like the retention, they're not looking elsewhere. They're not looking for a healthier landscape. They're not looking for a, like, well, at least if it's going to be this bad, I'll get paid more over here. These are things that I've heard in exit interviews. And so this nugget for the audience, and I'll challenge them, whether they're a leader or an informal leader, ask your people, why are we here? What do we love about this place? What can we make it to be better? What do we need to improve on? That's such a great takeaway.
Yeah, Jeff, there's something called perceived supervisor support. And perceived supervisor support is when an employee believes that their supervisor, manager, really is invested in them, not just their well-being, but their whole self. And then there's something called perceived organizational support. And when we can do this, there's a correlation between perceived supervisor support and perceived organizational support. And when employees feel perceived organizational support, there's more organizational commitment. That's why Mike said that it increases retention to 20%. These things are evidence based, there's data to back it. And we really need to look at these as key practices to cultivate in our organization. It goes back, leaders drive culture. This is how you're driving it.
Wow, that's awesome. Next slide, please. So we're talking about some operational outcomes here for leadership and responders both. We've talked about the visibility leads to fewer surprises. Consistency across supervisors. This is part of that messaging that I think, we talked a little bit earlier about for top down, and it's kind of messaged every day, and reducing liability exposure. In a lot of departments, they have to follow their state mandates and required training on mental resilience. And so I think those are all like important movements in policing. What else can be done? What else are you guys seeing out there?
Well, Jeff, I'll tell you something interesting when you mentioned the state mandates. Ryan and I just recently were working with the chief within a department, and we were talking about our online mental resilience training, and his concern was, well, I'm not sure that everybody's going to buy into it. What if we don't have the buy-in within the department to actually do this and go through with this and actually participate, which was a great point and a very valid point. And we shared with the chief that this is an organizational resilience issue. Number one, it's improving organizational resilience, and it also is a compliance issue because you're reducing risk by complying with state mandates. And that is huge to your point. And it was very interesting because we had a great conversation about that. And as we know, different states certainly have different state mandates. But when you look at reducing risk and really improving compliance, it goes even beyond organizational resilience to the next level.
And we
Excellent.
certainly want to help people. I mean, we have a deep passion for helping people, but you don't keep a program, where you can create psychological enhancement, right? Or psychological capital, that hope, that self-efficacy, that resilience, and that optimism, just because you believe not everybody's going to buy in. Reaching, you know, X percentage people is better than reaching no people. And then the benefit is, to Mike's point and yours, Chief, is that you're complying with that statute, which is a mandate. It's not optional. It's not like a standard or a administrative code. So when we go on to this other side for responders and the operational outcomes, it's really providing support before crisis. I want to share a personal story with you, and I want to really frame this from a lens of trauma-informed leadership. I'm going back to that term. And it's this: until you know someone's backstory, you don't know their full story. And what we have to understand as trauma informed leaders is that a person's biography, the things that have happened to them in their life, changes biology. Again, let's look at evidence based things here. The science tells us that trauma changes us on a cellular level. And when you look at approximately 70% of people will experience a traumatic event at least once in their life, we understand that there's a prevalence of trauma of people coming into the job already having real lived experiences. These people could certainly be dysregulated. How do I know this? I was one of them. I was a firefighter paramedic where there was a lot of people that didn't want to work with me. And there was a backstory that a lot of people didn't know. And this is before I got the help that I needed. And unbeknownst to so many people within the department, what they didn't know is that September 29th, 1995, I experienced a school shooting where my classmate pulled out a gun and shot and killed my classmate, our classmate. And so this occurred in Central Florida. So I'm already coming on the job with real lived experiences, and I don't need to make this a trauma informed leadership program, but it's really understanding that we need to be, I don't want to overuse this term, but I'm really passionate about this proactive resilience. And we're going to share this MHP R4 formula where we need to really provide resilience training to individuals before crisis. So there's more to come here. But again, let's not wait for the crisis to occur. There's people coming into your department already with hard trauma, and it's only going to be compounded by the things they see on the job.
Wow, powerful share there, Ryan. Thank you for that. James, let's advance one. It's so looking at agencies, how can they build this into their daily operations? We've talked about wellness being framed as readiness, right? When somebody's ready for a call, and they've got their bag, their rifle, their hoses, all the stuff that they need, knowing that that's not stigma laden, um, because we're ready and performance is part of the first responder's job. We're asked to do very difficult things, and mental wellness isn't something that should be stigmatized. It's part of just being ready. I make it akin to physical wellness. Um, Leadership using language shifts like wellness to readiness and resources to support is gonna, it's subtle, but I think it's gonna attest to that, that daily and regular communication, that messaging. Um, it that's like a little takeaway that we can do. Let's and I don't even like the term mental health because that it just screams like stigma. I like mental readiness. It's like, yeah, you're ready, and we're all at different degrees of readiness. So, um, Michael, can you add to that?
Yeah, and I think with the team itself, we want to normalize things like check-ins, the mental readiness check-ins, uh, making sure that we understand the signs and symptoms of really the mental health stress continuum. How can we help our brothers and sisters if there is a need? And it's team based, and it has to really be looked at to make resources available, so people not only understand what the resources are, but know that they are available, and know that there's not a stigma around actually utilizing the resources. And then when we can do that, it helps the team as a whole on a consistent basis get to the point where we don't need to even think about having a stigma, because the conversations around mental readiness and resilience have been normalized.
When we go to individual, we might sit here as leaders and think, okay, what's the end user experience? This is not the end user experience, because really and truly, the leaders within the organization should be using these things too. Leaders should be modeling the behaviors, and leaders are an individual themselves. So we want things that are easy to use. We want support that's immediately available, trusted, and confidential. And when we do that and we ingrain this into the culture, the individual really has the idea of taking care of their individual wellness is part of doing the job well.
Yeah, and
Excellent.
one other quick thing: if supervisors ignore wellness resources and practices, they get ignored. If they utilize them, they get normalized.
That's a great call out. Shifting gears to the next slide, where we look at what support looks like when it's practiced. And I'm asking myself the question, do I think these things have been effective at my agency? Um, Resilience, preparation. I think, I feel like we're probably like starting on the uphill swing. Like we got EAPs, we got peer support, um, we we made some steps, but I think for the audience, let's dig into some of these MHP R4 formula items and leave them with some real good takeaways.
Are- I'm seeing the same slide, how agencies are building into this operation. Uh, are we
Oh,
still on
James,
that
can we?
slide?
No, I'm sorry. We're on the next one. James, can you go one more? There we go. Sorry about that, gentlemen. Oh, we'll go.
We'll do one previous, James.
There we go.
Yeah, looking at the MHP R4 resilience formula, this is a way that you can really take this framework and integrate it into your culture. Again, leaders drive culture. Let's define it. So resilience preparation is really having a mindset that resilience is not a genetic trait. Resilience is the ability to maintain composure, adaptability, and flexibility in adverse environments and events. And so the good news is that it's not genetic. But there's also organizational resilience. Michael spoke to that. And we really want to frame this with the power DMS mindset from hire to retire. But we're going to take it even one step before that. And how can we, again, for recruiting purposes, really make the culture part? It starts with recruiting and it ends at retirement. So resilience preparation is really meeting with the peer support team, maybe your department psychologist or other resources within your community, and having them come into the onboarding training and ensure that the employees understand what resources are available. And this is a perfect time to drive EAP because we are a fan of EAP. We understand that some individuals may not use it, right? But sharing that phone number with the first responder so they can share it with their family and understanding what resources are available beyond mental health. With EAP, you can have things like adoption services. You can get free legal advice as long as it doesn't pertain to your employment. So there's really a focus on starting to drive that culture with the new employee and using cultural language that shows, hey, our leaders support this. They're bought into it. We want you to as well. And there's organizational support. Moving into resilience building for individuals, this is actually providing content, training, resources again, that is evidence based. And the research on resilience goes to show that we should have a 3-hour foundational training program. But we cannot have the belief that this is one and done. It needs to be a continuation throughout a person's career, including the emotional detachment as they prepare for retirement.
And then looking at resilience renovation, it's important to consistently understand, okay, what systems and processes do we already have in place and how can we improve, course correct, get better, and really continue to get to the next level because uh, we have come a long way in terms of mental resilience and mental readiness in the first responder world. And that's positive. That's good news. And yet we still have a ways to go in terms of renovating the existing systems and the structures that we have. And then we also really need to focus on resilient systems for the organization. And we mentioned some of these things before. And just to review, things like a stay at work program, things like a return to work program, things like one-to-one stay interviews. All of these are important organizational systems specifically designed for resilience. Things like peer support, things like EAP. We talked about the incredibly low utilization rate for the EAPs. And what's interesting about that is the fact that many people within departments don't even know all of what an EAP offers because it actually, in most cases, goes way beyond mental resilience or clinician help. There could be, financial advice or even legal advice, family help, all of these other kinds of things that EAPs can offer. So it's going to be important for leadership and the command staff to really educate people on these systems and these processes so they know. And Ryan and I have found that when there's robust education on the EAP program and people really understand it, the utilization rate tends to go way up.
I think the other thing, resilient systems is bringing in third-party administrators and ensuring that there's, empathy and speed with, we have someone get hurt on the job. It's a physical injury, but is that physical injury now leading into a mental health injury because, there's an impact in pay and they feel like there's a lack of perceived organizational support, and it's really dealing with the third party administrator. And I don't want to get too technical here, but I mean, those are things we really have to look at. And I think going with the resilience renovation, a good time to do that is Mental Health Awareness Month, May. Once a year, looking at all of the policies, the guidelines, and saying, are our policies fair and clear? Are we really focusing on better practice? There's so much to share in such a limited amount of time, but I hope this gives you a framework and ideas on how to create something holistic to really go beyond checking the box and integrating a culture that people believe. Okay, there's a psychological contract here that they support us.
Excellent. Great call out. James, can we advance one more? So we could be thinking, why do most efforts still struggle? It's because of kind of the opposite of what we've been talking to. There's limited visibility, no reinforcement. With limited people, there are gaps that exist that are just hard to fill. Some agencies putting forth effort still find that it's not as effective as they'd like. That's where I've got some solutions here on the next slide, James. If you want to advance one more, we can talk about some power policy, or I'm sorry, some power DMS products that can be like a building block towards moving us to operational readiness. One that I love and used is Power Vitals. This increases the visibility. Think of this as early intervention, sometimes called early warning, but again, I don't even like that. That warning makes it sound like something's bad. But I like that early visibility. This is like your check engine lights for careers on officers. Gives you early visibility into stress and patterns across individuals and teams. This assigns a pulse score. It interlinks with your CAD system, kind of gives you a pulse score when there's irregular events like use of force, car crash, pursuit, taser deployment, dog bite, what have you. Domestics, it's pre-configured. We can configure it with your agency, but this gives you insight into the visibility. Another favorite of mine is Powerline. This is an anonymous wellness resource. It's on your mobile phone. It's an app. It links directly to nationwide vetted peer support. This is like, everybody's got this in their hand. It's got articles on coaching. You got sleep problems, got articles on that. It can connect you with a vetted peer support person. You can see a little demographic about them, make sure they're in line, like, oh, I'm a patrol lieutenant. You could talk to another patrol lieutenant. I'll turn it over to Michael and Ryan for the rest of our time here to talk about the Mental Health Hygiene Project.
Ryan, I think you're muted.
Yep, you're muted, Ryan.
Sorry about that. There's Practical Reinforcement, the Mental Hygiene Project, an Orlando-based company that works with organizations to empower minds, boost resilience in the workforce through our evidence-based and our award-winning training program. Our foundational training program is called Psychological Empowerment 360. It underwent a 2-year research study with a third-party company. And what they found in our program is that it improves attitudes, behaviors, health, and well-being. And more specifically, it has a 2% increase in psychological capital. You might be thinking, only a 2% increase in psychological capital, that self-efficacy, hope, resilience, and optimism. But interestingly enough, for a medium-sized organization, it can increase revenue by $10 million. So it has a human and financial impact. It reduces pain, fatigue, improves sleep, and we have a whole course of catalog of courses. So, uh, Mike, any last comments on that?
Yeah, and just as so everyone on the call knows, we have 4 award-winning online courses that Ryan was alluding to, and they are all available through Power DMS. So if you're interested in our 4 courses, certainly please reach out, and they're all available through Power DMS because we are a strategic partner with the company.
I'm curious, are there any questions? I know that we're at time, but we'd love to take some questions if there are any.
We have one question submitted, and Zeta says good points. So not a question, but a compliment that I would like to echo to the group here as well. And we are at time here. So as we wrap up today's session, I want to sincerely thank all of you for spending time with us today. And a special thank you again to Jeff, Michael, and Ryan for an outstanding discussion. We hope today's conversation proved practical ideas and actionable strategies you can bring back to your agencies and teams, whether that's improving visibility into wellness challenges, reducing stigma, reinforcing leadership support, or making responder wellness a more natural part of day-to-day operations. A reminder that everyone who's registered will receive a follow-up email with the webinar recording, as well as all of the links and resources we saw today. And if you'd like more information about how Power DMS by NeoGov, including Power Vitals and Power Line, can support proactive responder wellness and operational readiness within your agency, we encourage you to schedule a personalized walkthrough with the team and find more information on our website. Thank you again for joining us today. We appreciate the work you do every day to support your people and your communities. Have a great afternoon, and we hope to see you again at a future webinar. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Everyone, have a great day.